Hey guys, welcome to today's lesson. I hope you're well. Today we are looking at ratios, so we're moving a little bit on from financial mathematics. Very easy to start off with. This should be year 7, year 8 work, so hopefully you remember it all. So this will be a rather brief video. First of all, can you remember what a ratio is? Well, a ratio is very similar to a fraction. For example, a fraction will compare two things. So for example, we have a fraction of a half, which would be the same as a fraction of 3/6, which would be the same as 50 over 100, etc. Now, we could shade shapes as a fraction. So for example, we could have this shape and we could shade it into 1/2. We could put it into quarters by putting a line down, and now we have 2 quarters. Or we could put a line through these bits here, okay, make it 4/8. You know, it's still going to be comparing one part to the whole bit, right? And that's all a ratio does as well. So for example, if you remember from year 7, year 8, we could write the ratio of 1/2 as 1:2. Okay, one part shaded out of a total of 2 parts, or 3 parts shaded out of a total of 6 parts, or 50 parts shaded to a total of 100 parts. And then just like with fractions, that we know that if we can simplify a ratio if needed, just like a fraction. So we know that 3/6 can go back to a half, or 50 over 100 can go back to a half. So these two ratios can both simplify down to the ratio of 1:2. Now, with that, remember, a simplified ratio means it's an integer. So you can't have a ratio of, let's say, 0.5 to 2. Okay, you need to have it as an integer. So for that example, I might simply double or times both of them by 2. Okay, I now get a ratio of 1:4. So it needs to be an integer, and it needs to be back down into its most basic form. So it's lowest common factor, let's say, or multiple. Now, also for a ratio, we have to make sure that we don't have units involved. So for example, you could have something that looks like 2 meters to, let's say, 100 centimeters. Okay, that's not a simplified ratio because they're comparing two different things, meters to centimeters. But what I could now do here, if I wanted to, is put 200 centimeters to 100 centimeters. And because they're now both comparing the same units, I can get rid of those units, okay, which gives me 200 to 100. And now I can simplify. Well, 100 goes into both of those, or I can just cross the 2 zeros off. I now get 2 to 1, and that's a nice simplified ratio. Okay, so again, hopefully this is bringing up those memories of ratios in years 6, 7, and 8. The other thing we often like to do is we like to divide things into a given ratio, and we'll look at an example when we get to that. So again, very brief introduction of what a ratio is and what are some things that we can do with them. So let's go into some questions. I'm going to do question 1 to start off with. You might want to pause this and simply run through your answers. I'm going to do these quite quickly myself as well. Okay, so how did you go? Did you remember how to do this stuff? I'm hoping you did. Okay, so 5 to 20. Now, 5 goes into both of those. So 5's a common factor. 5 goes into 5 once. 5 goes into 20 4 times. So 1:4 is my ratio. Now, here's a little trick too. If you do have a use of a calculator, so it's not if it's in a calculator-based exam, you could actually put into your calculator 5 over 20 and press equals, and it will give you a fraction of 1/4, but you need to remember to write it back as a ratio of 1:4, otherwise it won't work. If you did it the other way around and you did 20 over 5, and so you were doing 20 to 5, for example, the only other thing here too, your calculator will give you the answer of 4. And what you have to recognize, 4 is a fraction as 4 over 1, which means that's 4.1. So you can use a calculator for this work here, guys, to get those answers a little bit easier, particularly with fractions and decimals, make it a little bit more challenging. You can't do the next question on a calculator, I'm afraid, because you have 3 ratios here, so you do need to know the normal way as well. Okay, part B, how'd you go with 6, 3, and 18? Well, 3 goes into all of those, so I'm going to divide them all by 3. 6 divided by 3 is 2, 3 divided by 3 is 1, 18 divided by 3 is 6, 2 to 1 to 6 is my answer. The next one, if you want to do it in your calculator, make it a little bit easier and do 0.2 over 3, or you can even do 0.2 divided by 3. That will give you a quick answer. Otherwise, I can simply multiply both sides by 10, or within decimal point one place, and that gives me 2 to 30. I can now simplify down. I'm going to halve both of those or divide them by 2. I get 1 to 15 as my answer. Now, if you did on your calculator, the other thing too, you might get a decimal as your answer. Press your SD button, okay, and that will put it back into fraction form. That will give you 1 over 15 as a fraction, but once again, you need to write it as a ratio. If you don't, you will lose marks, okay? The next one, even more challenging. Again, you could put it as a fraction, as a half over 1/3. A little bit easier, you might do a division sign in between the two fractions like that. Again, that would give you something like 3 over 2, okay? And you can now write that as 3.2. Without the use of a calculator though, and that plan is this year, so certainly you might need to use this without a calculator. What I'm going to do is this. I'm going to find a common denominator. Now, a common denominator for 2 and 3, of course, would be 6. Okay, that means I times the bottom by 3 and the top by 3, so I get 3 over 6. The bottom by 2, the top by 2, I get 2 over 6. And now the fact they are both over 6, I can just say it's 3 to 2 on the top. Or if you want to times the left hand by the 6 and the right hand by the 6, they cancel out, and again you can see that the 3.2 comes out to play. Okay, same answer over here, but with NAPLAN, you still need to be able to do things without the use of a calculator. The next one, $1 to 20 cents. Well, I'm hoping straight away you recognized, well, you couldn't do much else with it anyway, the units are not the same. So let's put it to 100 cents to 20 cents. I'm going to knock a 0 off both sides, so I end up getting 10 to 2. I'm going to halve both of them, or divide them by 2. I get 5 to 1. And there we go. That's our answer. Pretty simple. Again, you could put 100 over 20 on your calculator like that. 100 over 20. But the problem is going to be you're going to get 5 as the answer. As long as you know 5 is 5 over 1, which is 5 to 1, then you're good to go as well. So again, calc, non-calc, up to you. The next one, 5 kilograms to 250 grams. You still need to know your units with this stuff. There are 1,000 grams in a kilogram. So 5,000 to 250. Again, I'm going to do this without the use of a calculator to start with. I'm going to cross a 0 off both sides. So I'm going to get 500 to 25. Now I'm going to divide both sides by 5. So I'm going to get 100 to 5, like that. I'm now going to divide them both by 5 again. Okay, I'm going to get 20 to 1, and that's my final answer. You could divide them by different numbers, like you could divide it by 25 to start off with if you wanted to, and it would have got you 20 to 1 straight away. Or of course, you could put 5,000 over 250 in your calculator. That would give you 20. But of course, remember, it's 20 over 1, which is 20 to 1. Same answer. Okay, and the last one here for G, 3 minutes to 1 hour. Again, you can change either both to minutes, or you could do both to hours. In this case, minutes is much easier. So I'm going to go 3 ... to 60. And notice each time I'm dropping off the units. The minute they are the same units, I'm dropping them off. I'm then going to divide both sides by 3. I get 1 to 20, and that's my answer. If you leave the units in, for example, 1 minute to 20 minutes, guess what? You get marked down, okay, because it's not a simplified ratio. A simplified ratio has no units. So please be careful with that. No silly incorrect answers, please. All right. The next 2 questions, you might remember these from year 8. Certainly we did these in year 8 at length, so I hope that you remember them. Pause it, have a crack at it, come back and let's see how you went. How did you go? Divide $600 in the ratio of 3 to 2 to 1. There are lots of ways to do this, guys. You can do it on a calculator. This is my favorite way. When we're looking at ratios, I first of all say, how many parts do I have in total? The old way I used to teach in year 8 would be, I have 3 boxes, I have 2 boxes, and I have 1 box. And remember, we want to find an amount that goes into each of those boxes that is exactly the same. Okay, so in total here, you have 3, 4, 5, I have 6 boxes. Or we often say 6 parts or 6 shares. And 6 parts or 6 shares is equal to $600, which means that 1 part or 1 share would simply be divided by 6, $100, which means that you'd be putting $100 in each of those boxes. And that makes sense because if I add those up, we get $300 to $200 to $100. And if I add them all up, of course, that makes my $600. Now, this says divide it into the ratio, therefore my answer is that last part. Now, in this style of question, we started with the ratio, and so my end is an amount, so I must put the units in. Okay, yes, I know it looks like a ratio, but certainly because you're dividing it into a measurement, we must have those amounts on. Please don't go backwards and go, hey, that's a ratio, I'm going to simplify it to 3 to 2 to 1, because you're just going back to what the question was, and it didn't ask for that. It wants the actual amounts. Now, it might have said, what is the smallest amount, okay, which would be $100. What is the biggest amount? $300. They might give you names, Tom, Joe, and Harry. Okay, and they might ask how much Harry got or Tom got. So just read the question, but also remember this is what we refer to in year 7 and 8 as the unitary method. We start with a total amount of parts, we find one part, then that allows us to find 3 parts, 2 parts, 1 part, or however many parts that we would like to find. The last question, okay, see how you went with this one? Very similar, but instead of them giving you the total amount of parts, they just give you one section of it. So in this case, we know it's 4 parts to 5 parts, all right? And it says the smallest section, which is the 4 parts, is 1.2 meters. So 4 parts equals 1.2 meters, not 9 parts. We're looking for the whole amount. We want the 9 parts at the end of it. So I'm going to look at the same method though, unitary. I'm just going to find one part. How do I do that? Well, I just simply divide it by how many I've got. I've got 4, divide it by 4. Okay, 12 divided by 4 is 3. We need to have a decimal point in there. So 0.3 meters, you can do it on a calculator. So every single part is worth 0.3 meters. Now, 2 ways I could do this. A very quick way is I've got 4 parts on the left, 5 parts on the right. So I have 9 parts in total. Therefore, 0.3 times 9, 3 9s are 27, 2.7 meters. That's the easiest possible way in this question. If you want to do a slightly different way, you could find the 5 parts. 5 parts is 1.5 meters, because 5 times 0.3 is 1.5. And I would add that on to the 0.3. Their amounts to the 1.2, and 1.2 plus 1.5 is 2.7 is still correct. So both of those methods would work, but you have to know the style of question that you're looking at. Now, gents, again, that's ratios. Know how to simplify them, know how to make sure you leave them out with units, know how to divide them, work through those questions, remember and revise stuff that you've got in your memory bank, and hopefully you'll have no problems with the work ahead of you. Have a wonderful day. Hope you're doing well down there. I look forward to seeing you soon.